Racist cop shaved black woman's head. She took the bench and made him pay. The cold clippers buzzed against Celeste Bradford's scalp like a swarm of wasps, sharp, cruel, vibrating. She didn't flinch, didn't scream, didn't beg. She simply stared ahead, jaw locked, eyes unmoving, as thick silver coils of her hair tumbled to the floor. One strand, then another, then handfuls. The hands holding her in place didn't hesitate. Neither did the man wielding the clippers. Deputy Grant Kessler chuckled as he shaved her head clean. "You should thank me," he muttered, brushing loose hairs off his glove. "You'll look less threatening now. More neutral." The other officer in the room, younger, barely 30, shifted uncomfortably. But he said nothing. He just looked at the floor as if the tiles might offer some kind of moral clarity. Celeste spoke, her voice low but steady. "This is illegal," Kessler leaned in. "Only if you can prove it." He snapped off the clippers and tossed them onto a nearby table. The air in the room felt heavier now, coated in humiliation and disbelief. He opened the door with a lazy flick of his wrist. "You're free to go, sweetheart. Next time, show up with some respect." Celeste stood slowly. Her shoulders were squared. Her hands didn't shake, not outwardly. But in her chest something thundered. Not fear, not even rage. No, what she felt was sharper than that, like a scalpel gliding along bone. It was purpose. She picked up her federal ID card from the desk where Kessler had left it, slipped it into her pocket, and walked out without another word. The hallway outside the screening room was silent. Two clerks, both white, both wide-eyed, stood frozen as she passed. One opened their mouth to say something, maybe an apology, maybe a defense, but thought better of it. Celeste didn't stop. The double doors to courtroom 3 loomed at the end of the corridor, the place where everything would begin or end. When she pushed the doors open, the courtroom fell silent. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Some people blinked twice, not sure what they were seeing. Others recognized her immediately and gasped softly. There was no mistake. The woman who had just walked in, scalp raw, face calm, was not a witness. She wasn't a defendant. She was the judge, and her courtroom was full of people who had just watched her be treated like a criminal. Celeste's heels echoed loudly across the floor as she approached the bench. Her judicial robe had already been placed over her chair by a clerk who now looked pale and terrified. Celeste didn't need help putting it on. She slipped it over her shoulders one movement at a time, like a warrior donning armor. Then she turned to face the courtroom. "I assume the docket is ready," she said. The court reporter's voice cracked. "Yes, Your Honor." Celeste nodded once, her expression unreadable. She sat down, adjusted the mic, and began. "We will begin today's proceedings in the matter of the state versus Officer Devin Price and Officer Alan Gentry, case number 3327C, on charges of excessive force, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations." She didn't mention Kessler. Not yet. That would come. What mattered right now was the law. And the law was hers to wield. Earlier that morning, just after 7:50 a.m., Celeste had pulled into the lot behind the Savannah Federal Courthouse. Her silver Ford Taurus, 10 years old but spotless, hummed quietly as she turned off the ignition. She sat for a moment, breathing deeply. The sky outside was clear, the Georgia humidity not yet unbearable. She wore a navy blue pantsuit, sharp pleats pressed to perfection, and carried a slim leather portfolio. Her silver-gray locks were twisted back from her face, glinting in the light. She looked every bit the part, composed, professional, commanding. But when she approached the main entrance and passed through the first checkpoint, it became clear that no one cared about any of that. At the metal detector, Deputy Kessler was leaning against the scanner like he owned the place. Tall, broad, Mid-50s, buzz-cut, and smug. A man who liked to pretend he had more power than he actually did. Celeste offered her ID before he could ask. Kessler barely glanced at it. "No badge?" he said. "That is my badge," she replied. "I don't see a uniform." "I'm a federal judge." He let out a dry laugh. "Sure you are." The young officer beside him shifted uncomfortably. "She's on the list, sir. Judge Celeste Bradford. She's presiding today in courtroom 3. Kessler ignored him. "Ma'am," he said, emphasizing the word like an insult, "step aside. You're getting the full check." Celeste blinked once. "There's no legal cause for a secondary search." "Suspicious behavior is cause enough," he said flatly. He motioned toward the hallway where a small side room with no windows waited like a trap. She paused. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked. "You don't get to threaten me," Kessler snapped. "Let's go." He placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. And just like that, it began. Inside the screening room, Kessler went through the motions like he'd done it 100 times. Maybe he had. Maybe to people who looked just like her. He ordered her to remove her shoes, then her blazer. When she refused to comply further without legal grounds, he smiled and pulled out a set of clippers from the equipment tray. "You know how many things you can hide in hair like that," he said. "This is a violation," Celeste said, voice sharp. He didn't care. The buzzing filled the room. So did the silence. Because the other officer didn't move, didn't stop him, didn't even blink. Only when it was done did Celeste move again, slow, deliberate. She turned, took her things, and left the room like a queen walking away from ashes. Now, seated at the bench, she tapped her pen against the folder in front of her. The gallery still hadn't recovered. Some were still stealing glances at her scalp, others at Kessler, who had resumed his post near the courtroom doors, face pale, jaw tight. He looked like a man who'd just realized he'd lit a match over a lake of gasoline. Celeste didn't look at him. Not yet. She had a trial to run. But when the time came, he wouldn't just be a footnote in her courtroom. He would be a case, and this time she would write the verdict. The courtroom fell quiet again as the bailiff called the next witness. Celeste remained composed behind the bench, but her heart was beating in a steady, thunderous rhythm. Her scalp still tingled from the assault just an hour ago, but she wore her robe like armor. She wasn't just holding court, she was holding herself together. Across from her, Officer Devon Price sat stiffly at the defense table. He was clean-cut, mid-40s, his uniform perfectly pressed, his jaw clenched like he had something to prove. Celeste had seen the type before, officers who had learned to perform respect, who could say ma'am and sir while hiding their disdain behind regulation smiles. But it was the young black man walking to the witness stand who caught her attention. "State your name for the record," the prosecutor said. "Jamal Everett," the young man replied. He couldn't have been older than 22. Tall, lean, eyes that had seen more than his age should allow. He adjusted his blazer nervously, glancing toward the defense table, then toward Celeste. "You're safe here," she said, her voice softer than before, but every bit as firm. Jamal nodded slowly. I've never been in a courtroom where anyone said that." The gallery murmured. The prosecutor cleared her throat. "Mr. Everett, can you tell the court what happened on the night of April 17th? Jamal looked down at his hands, then up again. "I was walking home from my shift at the grocery store. I work night stock. I had my headphones in, and I didn't even notice the squad car until it pulled up beside me." "Who was inside the vehicle?" "Officer Price and Officer Gentry." "What happened then?" "They told me to stop, asked me what I was doing out that late. I told them I was coming home from work, showed them my apron. But they said I looked suspicious." Celeste didn't flinch, but she felt her jaw tighten. "They got out of the car, told me to put my hands on the hood. I kept asking what I did wrong. Gentry said I was being aggressive. I wasn't, I swear. I just wanted to go home. Did they physically restrain you? They slammed me on the hood, hard. One of them, Price, I think, yanked my backpack off and dumped it out in the street. Then they handcuffed me and shoved me in the back of the car. For how long? Almost 2 hours. They said they were waiting for confirmation, but there was nothing to confirm. I didn't have any warrants. I didn't have anything. And were you released? They dropped me off 2 blocks from my house. Didn't apologize, didn't even look at me. Was a report filed? Jamal laughed, bitter. I tried. Went to Internal Affairs. They said they'd look into it. Never heard back. Celeste felt something tighten in her chest. She had heard that story too many times. Too many variations of it, each one dressed in a different uniform, each one buried under forms and silence. She looked toward Officer Price. His face was unreadable, but there was a flash of discomfort behind his eyes now, like he knew the world was starting to tilt under him. The prosecutor stepped back. Your Honor, no further questions. Celeste leaned forward. Officer Price, she said, do you wish to respond? His attorney rose quickly. Your Honor, we'd prefer to reserve comment for the proper phase of the proceedings. Celeste raised an eyebrow. Very well. Jamal stepped down and took a seat behind the prosecution. Celeste made eye contact with him once more and gave a small nod. He nodded back. A break was called. The courtroom buzzed with quiet conversation, journalists texting furiously, activists whispering in the back rows. Celeste remained seated, but her thoughts weren't on the trial. They were on the side room, on the Clippers, on the silence of the young officer who watched it all and said nothing. Her clerk, Nina, walked up to the bench. There's someone asking to speak with you privately. Says it's urgent. Says it's about Deputy Kessler. Celeste hesitated. Who is it? Court Administrator. Walter Briggs. She nodded. Send him to my chambers. In her office, the air was cooler, quieter, but not calmer. Walter Briggs was already there, standing awkwardly in front of her desk. A stout white man in his early 60s, blazer tight over his frame, eyes nervous behind thick glasses. Judge Bradford, he began, wringing his hands. I heard what happened. Celeste didn't offer him a seat. I know it's late. I should have come forward a long time ago. You knew? She asked. Walter hesitated. Kessler's been a problem for years. There've been complaints. Some filed formally, some not. And they were reviewed internally, but never escalated. Why not? Walter's voice dropped. Because people protected him, said he was old school, said he got the job done. You know the language. Celeste's eyes narrowed. Do you have records? I do. I kept copies. I was scared to share them before, but after what happened to you, after what I saw in that hallway, I couldn't stay quiet. He slid a manila envelope across the desk. Celeste opened it. Inside were a dozen documents, redacted reports, formal complaints from courthouse employees and visitors alike, all naming Kessler. All dismissed. One of them dated back 8 years. The description: unlawful search and humiliation of black woman at checkpoint. Her stomach turned. She looked up. You realize these documents prove complicity? Walter nodded, guilt etched in every wrinkle of his face. That's why I'm giving them to you. Do whatever you think is right. She didn't thank him. She just said, You'll be called to testify. He nodded again. I figured. When he left, Celeste stood alone in her office, holding the weight of years of silence in her hands. Kessler wasn't just a bad actor. He was a symptom, and she was done treating symptoms. Back in the courtroom, she took her seat once more. The gavel hit the bench with a sharp crack. The court is back in session, she said, And before we move forward, I have a motion to enter into the record." She raised the envelope. "The court has been presented with new evidence regarding misconduct by Deputy Grant Kessler, including a documented pattern of racial targeting and abuse." Kessler, still posted by the rear door, froze. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Celeste's voice cut through them. "This court will not protect abusers of power. Effective immediately, Deputy Kessler is relieved of duty pending criminal investigation." Gasps. Officers moved in. Kessler took a step back, hand near his hip. Celeste stood. "Don't you dare!" Kessler's hand hovered for a breathless second, then dropped. The cuffs went on. The silence was deafening. Celeste sat again, robe billowing behind her like smoke. "This court," she said, "will now proceed." And this time no one doubted who was in charge. The rain started sometime around noon, pattering against the tall courthouse windows like a warning. Judge Celeste Bradford stood behind her chamber's desk, hands gripping the edge of the wood as she stared at the files Walter Briggs had left her. Each page told a story she already knew too well: black citizens being profiled, detained, demeaned. Each complaint a whisper buried in red tape. She flipped through them slowly, methodically, until one page made her stop cold. It was a sealed incident report from 4 years ago. A black female defense attorney, Harper Lyles, was stopped at security, questioned aggressively, and subjected to a random hair inspection by Deputy Kessler. The complaint noted that her afro was suspiciously voluminous. No action taken. Celeste leaned back, fury pressing hard against her ribs. They'd been doing this for years, and now that she had the bench, the files, and the power, they weren't going to get away with it anymore. A soft knock pulled her back to the moment. Nina stepped in, her voice low. "Judge Bradford, the U.S. Marshal's office just called. They're dispatching an oversight team to review courthouse security. They'll be arriving in the next 24 hours. Celeste's eyes narrowed. "They move fast when the cameras are watching." "They also want to speak with you off the record," Nina added. "Apparently they've been getting anonymous tips." Celeste folded her arms. "Tell them I'll meet with them after today's hearing. Not a second sooner." She turned back to the window, watching as the rain streaked across the glass in crooked trails. Somewhere below, the first waves of media were gathering, tipped off by what had happened earlier that morning. She hadn't seen the footage, but she didn't need to. Enough people had witnessed what happened to her in that side room. It was only a matter of time before the whole world saw it too. Back in the courtroom, the crowd had doubled. Not just lawyers and reporters now, community members, law students, activists. There was a quiet electricity in the air, the kind that made even the seasoned attorneys sit a little straighter. Celeste took the bench with the same calm precision she always carried, but inside she was burning. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Your Honor, the next witness is ready." "Proceed," Celeste said. The doors opened and a man in a charcoal suit entered. Late 50s, broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked hair and a limp in his left leg. His presence alone shifted the room. "Please state your name for the record." "Marshal Thomas Avery, retired." Celeste blinked. She hadn't expected him. Avery was a legend in the Southern Circuit, one of the few black U.S. Marshals who'd survived the system long enough to retire with his dignity intact. He had trained countless bailiffs and courthouse deputies across the state, including, Celeste remembered, Grant Kessler. "Mr. Avery, were you at any point directly responsible for training Deputy Kessler?" "Yes, ma'am," Avery said. "Back in 2005. He was one of my recruits." "And how would you characterize his performance?" Avery hesitated. "He was competent, followed procedure, but he was selective." Selective? In who he believed procedure applied to. He didn't say it directly, but you could feel it. The way he watched black visitors closer, The way he asked questions nobody else would have asked. I pulled him aside once about it. He said, "Some folks just don't know how to act in places like this." A ripple of outrage moved through the courtroom. Celeste leaned forward slightly. "Did you report this behavior?" Avery exhaled. "I did. I wrote a formal concern, filed it with courthouse security leadership. And it vanished. Never heard another word." Celeste nodded slowly. "Do you still have a copy?" He reached into his jacket and produced a folded page. "I figured I might need it today." The prosecutor took it and quickly marked it for the record. Celeste studied Avery. "You could have stayed retired. Why come forward now?" He looked her in the eye. "Because I watched the video. I watched them put their hands on you, and I realized I trained the man who did it. I can't live with that unless I help tear it down." Celeste's throat tightened. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The prosecutor nodded. "No further questions." As Avery stepped down, Celeste called a brief recess. The courtroom began to buzz, but she remained in her seat. Her eyes were fixed on the defense table. Kessler's attorney was clearly sweating, flipping through notes that were now meaningless. The tide had shifted. Everyone could feel it. In the hallway outside, Celeste found herself face to face with a woman in her early 30s, pressed suit, nervous eyes. She held a notebook in her hands like a shield. "Judge Bradford?" she asked softly. "Yes. My name's Talia Rivers. I'm a reporter. I'm not here to ambush you. I'm here to listen." Celeste studied her. "That's new?" Talia nodded. "I watched what happened in that room. I've been in courthouses for 10 years. I've never seen anything like it. I'd like to tell your story, on your terms." Celeste hesitated. The old version of her would have refused. Too dangerous, too political. But the woman who stood here now in a rain-soaked hallway, after surviving humiliation on federal ground, wasn't interested in silence anymore. "Not yet," she said, "but stay close. There's more coming." Back inside, the next witness was called, a janitor named Miguel Ortiz, mid-40s, brown-skinned, eyes heavy with things he hadn't yet said. He'd worked the night shifts, seen more than he should have. "Miguel," Celeste said, "you filed a complaint against Deputy Kessler, didn't you?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Honor. About 3 years ago. He searched my cart. Said he was looking for contraband. Said I was moving too fast. What was in the cart? Cleaning supplies and my lunch." "Did he file a report?" But when I asked why he did it, he said, "You don't belong near the judge's chambers. Stick to the service hallway." The room went still. Celeste's voice was quiet, but every syllable sharp. "And what happened after your complaint?" "I was reassigned. Basement level. Night janitor. I never saw the sunlight for 2 years." He swallowed hard. "But I'm here now." Celeste stared at him, the weight of his quiet resilience pressing down on her. "Thank you, Mr. Ortiz. You may step down." As the gallery murmured, Celeste leaned back in her chair. What they didn't know yet, what they were about to learn, was that the footage from that morning had just gone viral, and the Department of Justice was no longer just watching. They were coming, and she would be ready. The courthouse was unusually quiet for a Friday afternoon. Even the air seemed thicker, like it was holding its breath. Judge Celeste Bradford sat in her chambers, staring at the sealed envelope on her desk. Her clerk, Nina, had delivered it only minutes before, saying it had come directly from the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. Celeste hesitated a moment longer before breaking the seal. Inside was a summary brief. Internal records. Confirmed suppression of complaints against multiple officers, Deputy Grant Kessler chief among them. There were signatures, redacted names. But one caught her eye. It wasn't just Kessler who buried reports. It was also Judge Alan Dorsey, her former mentor, the man who once wrote her recommendation to the bench. Celeste's jaw tensed. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She'd always suspected the old boys' club ran deeper than she could see, but this wasn't oversight. It was conspiracy. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Nina again. "Judge, he's here." Celeste sat up straighter. "Bring him in." The door opened to reveal a man in a navy suit, mid-40s, calm, calculated. He introduced himself simply. "Special Agent Marcus Tate, Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division." Celeste motioned to the seat across from her. "We've begun our investigation," Tate said. "Your footage accelerated everything. We're no longer just looking at misconduct. We're preparing a civil rights prosecution." Celeste nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Two things," Tate replied. "First, your judicial account of the incident, signed, notarized. Second, access to the court's internal personnel files." "I can authorize that today," she said. He leaned in. "Good, because we already have a warrant to retrieve Kessler's security clearance records. If there's even a trace of cover-up, we'll find it." Celeste studied him. "What about the other names? The ones who signed off on those buried complaints?" Tate's tone turned cold. "No one's off limits. Not anymore." Outside the chambers, the energy in the building was shifting. News vans lined the curb. Protesters held signs up against the glass. "Protect black women." "Strip power from racists." "We stand with Judge Bradford." In the courtroom, the crowd was thicker than ever. The next witness was a woman in her late 60s. Slim frame, gray curls pulled into a tight bun, eyes sharp as razors. Her name was Lorraine Mayfield. The prosecutor called her to the stand. Celeste didn't recognize the name, but something in Lorraine's face said she'd been waiting years to speak. "Mrs. Mayfield, can you tell us why you're here?" "I was a courtroom clerk here for 22 years, she said. "Retired 5 years ago." "Did you witness Deputy Kessler engage in discriminatory behavior?" Lorraine looked directly at Celeste. "I witnessed much worse," she said. Gasps rippled through the gallery. "Clarify," the prosecutor urged. Lorraine held her gaze. "I watched that man rough-handle defendants, intimidate public defenders, delay black families from entering hearings on time. Once I saw him escort a crying girl, maybe 16, into that same back room Judge Bradford was taken into. She came out with her hair hacked off and her shirt wrinkled. He claimed she was being disruptive. Did you file a report?" "I tried," Lorraine said, "but Judge Dorsey told me I was misinterpreting security protocol, that I was letting my emotions interfere." Celeste's pulse surged. Dorsey's name again. "And what made you decide to come forward now?" Lorraine's eyes narrowed. "Because when I saw what he did to you, I realized if even a federal judge wasn't safe, then what chance did any of us ever have?" Celeste swallowed hard. The silence in the courtroom stretched. "Thank you," she said softly. When Lorraine stepped down, Celeste called a recess, retreating to her chambers like she'd been carrying a storm in her chest. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, fingers brushing the short stubble on her scalp. No wig, no makeup, just the truth, raw and unapologetic. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Reverend Elijah Hill. Heard about Dorsey. Not surprised. If you need me in that courtroom, say the word. We've got a list of voices ready to testify, Celeste replied quickly. Not yet, but soon. Be ready. The door to her chambers creaked. Nina peeked in. Judge Dorsey's in the building. He's asked to see you privately. Celeste straightened. Send him in. The man who entered wore confidence like a cloak. Judge Alan Dorsey, semi-retired, still wielding influence like a scepter. Celeste, he said with a too warm smile, you're making quite the headlines. She didn't return the pleasantry. "You're here because you know what's coming," she said. He laughed dryly. "I'm here because I mentored you, because I know how things get blown out of proportion, and because you don't want to burn your bridges before you really start climbing." Celeste stood slowly, walked to the window. "You signed off on every dismissed complaint against Kessler. Everyone." He stayed silent. "You endorsed his promotions, gave him access to that screening room. And you signed off on my recommendation. The irony isn't lost on me." Dorsey shrugged. "The system needs order, Celeste, not chaos. Men like Kessler keep the noise down." "Men like Kessler are the noise," she snapped. He stepped closer, voice low. "Tread carefully. You still have a career to protect." Celeste turned to face him. "You're not warning me. You're begging me." She walked to her desk, picked up the DOJ envelope, and handed it to him. "This is your legacy now. The DOJ has your name on record. They'll decide what happens next." Dorsey's face fell for the first time. "I suggest you retire fully," she said, "before someone else makes that choice for you." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came, and Celeste didn't give him the chance to find them. She turned away and, with a voice steady as steel, said, "This meeting is over." When the door closed behind him, she finally let herself breathe. One bridge burned, but what she was building now, it didn't need his foundation. It needed fire. The morning of the disciplinary hearing arrived with a storm outside and pressure inside. Clouds hung low over Atlanta's Federal District Courthouse, casting a gray pall over the city. But inside the courtroom, the energy was electric. Judge Celeste Bradford entered through the main hall, not the judge's private entrance. Her presence alone silenced conversations. No wig, no scarf, just her buzzed silver-black hair and a quiet, determined fire in her eyes. Every heel click on the marble sounded like a countdown. Today wasn't about Grant Kessler alone. It was about everything he represented, and everyone who'd protected him. When Celeste entered the courtroom, the gallery rose. The tension was thick, unspoken. Federal observers were present, DOJ officials, media, and near the back a growing group of citizens, some holding signs, others holding memories. Kessler was already there, sitting beside his lawyer, looking far less smug than he had just a week ago. His uniform was gone, replaced by a gray suit that hung uncomfortably on his frame. The arrogance in his eyes was still there, but dimmer, bruised. The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, the Department of Justice formally requests that the court hear from key witnesses today regarding past complaints, systemic suppression of reports, and the personal assault against a sitting judge." Celeste nodded, voice calm. "Proceed." The first witness called was Megan Whitlow, the young intern who had watched it all unfold that morning. She stepped up to the stand, nervous but composed, her blazer a little too big on her frame. "Megan," the prosecutor asked gently, "can you tell the court what you witnessed on the morning of the incident involving Judge Bradford?" "I was standing by the security checkpoint," Megan began, voice trembling. "I saw Judge Bradford approach. I saw Deputy Kessler stop her. His tone, it wasn't protocol. It was personal. Then he took her badge and said something about her not looking like a federal anything." "Did you see where he took her?" "Yes, into the back room, the one with no windows." Megan hesitated. Celeste leaned forward slightly, offering a steadying look. "And what happened next?" I didn't go in, but I heard the clippers. I heard her say she didn't consent, and I saw her walk out later, hair gone, expression blank. I've never seen someone look so violated." The courtroom was silent. "Thank you, Miss Whitlow," Celeste said softly. "You've been brave." The next witness brought everything to a boil. Lorraine Mayfield returned. This time she held a folder. "I wasn't just a clerk," she said. I kept copies of reports, emails. I knew someday someone would need them. The prosecutor accepted the folder and displayed one document on the screen overhead. It was a formal complaint dated 3 years prior. A young black attorney had alleged that Deputy Kessler had slammed him against a wall after questioning why he was searched entering his own trial. The note in the margin read, "Complainant appears overly sensitive." Celeste didn't flinch. She let it sit there, exposed. One by one, more documents appeared. Anonymous notes, direct complaints, all dismissed. And the signatures at the bottom, mostly Judge Alan Dorsey's. Celeste turned to Kessler's attorney. "Would your client like to address these reports?" The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, my client asserts that he followed standard operating procedure under the courthouse's established guidelines, even when shaving the head of a federal judge." A long pause. "My client believed she was a security risk." Celeste leaned forward, voice ice cold. "Did he believe I was hiding explosives in my scalp?" The attorney swallowed hard. He cannot answer that without further counsel." Celeste sat back. "Then let's proceed." That's when the twist hit. The prosecutor turned to the bench. "Your Honor, we request to enter into evidence a newly obtained internal memo between Deputy Kessler and Chief Security Officer Travis McDowell, dated 6 months ago." It was displayed on the screen. "Got another one of them coming in next week. Already heard she's woke and got opinions. I'll handle it the usual way, screening room treatment. Gotta remind 'em who's boss." Gasps filled the room. The phrase, "the usual way," hit like a thunderclap. Celeste's jaw tightened. "Do we know who another one of them refers to?" The prosecutor turned pages. "Judge Helena Thomas. She filed an informal concern, but was advised not to pursue it due to her pending nomination." Kessler's mask cracked. For the first time, he looked genuinely afraid. The courtroom broke into whispers. Celeste banged the gavel. "This court will have order." Then she turned her attention fully to Kessler. "Stand," she said. He did, slowly, hesitantly. "You didn't just violate me. You've made a career of weaponizing power against those least protected. You thought your badge made you untouchable. You thought silence would keep you safe." Celeste's voice dropped like a blade being drawn. "But your silence ends today. Your arrogance ends today. And this courtroom? It is no longer your hunting ground." She turned to the DOJ team. "This court authorizes a formal review of Deputy Kessler's full employment history, including every complaint, every dismissed report, and every name that signed off. Effective immediately, he is suspended from duty and placed under federal investigation for civil rights violations." Kessler's lawyer tried to speak, but the moment was lost. The gallery erupted, not in cheers, but in stunned awe. Celeste looked at Kessler one last time. "You shaved my head to strip me of dignity, but all you did was reveal the fire beneath." She banged the gavel once. "Recess. 10 minutes." As she stepped away, the crowd parted, not out of fear, but respect. And as Celeste disappeared through the judge's door, she knew. She wasn't just winning, she was rewriting the rules. The morning after Deputy Grant Kessler's suspension, Judge Celeste Bradford stood in her chambers with a thick file folder in her hands. Unmarked, unlogged, slid quietly under her door before sunrise. She didn't need to guess who left it. Lorraine Mayfield's quiet determination had spoken louder than most people's outrage. Inside were names. Not just the ones Kessler had harmed directly, but a list of court employees, attorneys, even jurors, Black, Latino, queer, who had reported being humiliated, targeted, detained, or physically handled by Kessler. Every case tucked away under protocol and stamped resolved. One complaint described how a young black paralegal had her briefcase dumped and was made to reassemble it in front of a snickering security crew. Another described a teenage boy, the son of a plaintiff, detained for wandering too close to the clerk's office. All logged, all ignored, and at the bottom of several dismissal memos, the same signature, Judge Vernon Fields, retired, revered, the one who had sworn Celeste in during her appointment, the man who once called her a symbol of progress. The betrayal knotted in her gut. Her clerk, Mariah, entered quietly. "There's someone here asking to speak with you. Says he used to work in courthouse security." Celeste nodded. "Send him in." A tall man in his 50s stepped through the door, back slightly bent, face weathered but eyes clear. "My name's Darius Cole. I did courthouse security here from 2005 to 2015. I heard what happened. I saw your name on the news." Celeste gestured for him to sit. He didn't. "I won't take long. I just wanted you to know. I should have spoken up years ago. I saw Kessler push a public defender once, a woman. Saw him follow a Latina ADA into the staff elevator and pin her with questions. Back then, I thought, if I just kept my head down, I could keep my job. But when I saw what he did to you..." Something snapped. Celeste studied him. "What do you want to do now?" He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Swear a statement. On record." Her silence was all the permission he needed. Later that morning, the courtroom swelled again, standing room only. Word had spread far beyond Atlanta. Civil rights organizations, law school students, and even retired judges now watched from rows in the back or via live stream. But today's drama didn't begin with a gavel. It began with an email. As Celeste was about to take her seat, Mariah leaned in and whispered, "Emergency motion filed this morning by the Defense Counsel. They're requesting your immediate recusal from all courthouse security cases, past, present, and pending." Celeste didn't flinch. She took her seat slowly, letting the buzz in the gallery rise to a quiet hum. The defense stood. "Your Honor, we contend that Judge Bradford's personal involvement in this matter renders her too emotionally compromised to preside over any further hearings related to Deputy Kessler or his broader security division." Celeste locked eyes with him. "Are you suggesting that surviving an assault by an officer under this court's jurisdiction disqualifies me from upholding the law?" "No disrespect intended, Your Honor, but perception of impartiality is key." Celeste stood. "Perception is exactly what we're discussing, and perception, I might add, has for years allowed men like Deputy Kessler to operate unchecked while those who came forward were dismissed as emotional, dramatic, or delusional." The courtroom tensed. She stepped down from the bench and walked slowly toward the defense table. "You want to discuss impartiality? Let's talk about how you sat silently while 12 complaints were buried. Let's talk about how this courthouse prioritized order over truth and silence over justice." She looked around the room. "This isn't about me. This is about every person who was told they didn't belong here. And if my presence reminds you of the system's failures, good. Let it haunt you." She returned to her chair and nodded to the clerk. "Motion denied." A sharp rustle ran through the gallery like wind through leaves. Then the next witness was called. Ashley Reed, 27, former intern, first-year law student now. She'd been one of the youngest complainants on record against Kessler, dragged aside at age 19 for walking too confidently through the staff hallway. She took the stand with tears in her eyes, but fire in her voice. "I tried to report him. I filled out forms. I even met with courthouse HR. I was told, maybe don't wear heels so high next time if you don't want to attract attention." The court was dead silent. "I almost dropped out of law school because of that. I thought, if this is how the system works on the inside, what hope is there?" Celeste didn't blink. "And why didn't you?" Ashley looked at her, voice trembling. Because I saw your appointment, and I thought, if you made it, maybe the system can change. Celeste swallowed hard. The defense offered no questions. During recess, Celeste remained on the bench. She didn't want to retreat to her chambers. Not today. She wanted the people to see her, raw, upright, present. That's when Reverend Leo Clay approached from the gallery. A lifelong advocate, now retired, he'd once been arrested for protesting outside this very courthouse. Judge Bradford, he said, voice raspy but warm. We've been waiting for someone like you. She smiled faintly. I'm not the first. No, he agreed, but you're the loudest we've had in a while. She didn't deny it. Are you ready to finish this? He asked. She looked past him, to the crowd, to the cameras, to the students scribbling every word. I was born ready. And as the gavel echoed again, the day's final witness stepped forward. An officer, still on the job, still wearing the uniform, but this time on the right side of history. Name? The prosecutor asked. Officer Terrence Lewis, 11 years in courthouse security. And why are you here? Lewis took a deep breath. Because I helped cover for Kessler. I looked away. I laughed at his jokes. I ignored the complaints. But after what he did to Judge Bradford, I realized silence is betrayal. Celeste's heart pounded. Lewis continued. I'm not here to save myself. I'm here because justice doesn't survive off silence. It thrives off truth. And if we're going to clean this house, I'm starting with my own broom. The courtroom exhaled. Celeste leaned forward, not as a judge, but as someone who'd bled for the truth. Thank you for telling the truth, she said. It's not too late to be on the right side of it. That night, the courthouse didn't sleep, and neither did the system, because one by one the walls of silence were crumbling, and the storm Celeste had unleashed was just getting started. The storm outside was only a shadow of what was brewing within the courthouse walls. Celeste stood by the tall windows of her chambers, arms crossed, the distant rumbles of thunder folding into the sounds of approaching footsteps. Her desk was scattered with copies of sworn affidavits, now growing by the day. Darius Cole's statement, Ashley Reed's testimony, Officer Terrence Lewis's full confession, names, dates, and directives, implicating multiple courthouse officials who'd helped bury complaints and silence victims. But the file sitting open on her desk was different. It was stamped confidential and bore the seal of the Office of the Inspector General. It had arrived via courier that morning, accompanied by a short, clipped message. Per your inquiry, this is a full audit of all misconduct reports filed within the Atlanta Federal Courthouse between 2009 and 2022. Celeste turned the pages slowly, eyes scanning the redacted lines, noting the patterns, seeing the gaps where names had been blacked out, but not all of them. Several stood out, names she had once trusted, supervising judges, senior clerks, even a former chief prosecutor who had gone on to become a cable news analyst, and buried between two pages, a memo from 2014, a directive issued by then-Chief Judge Vernon Fields. The subject line chilled her. Handling high-risk complaint categories, HRCC, black and minority litigants, attorneys, and court staff. Celeste leaned against the edge of the window frame, nausea rising in her chest. She remembered 2014. That was the year she'd been told, after a glowing interview and top scores on her judicial assessment, that she lacked the courtroom gravitas to advance to circuit judge. That same year, 2 junior white male candidates had sailed through with half her credentials. Now she understood. It hadn't been her qualifications. It had been her skin. The knock on the door jolted her. Mariah entered, pale. Your Honor, you need to see this. She turned the monitor on her desk towards Celeste and pressed play. It was a leaked security video. Grainy, time-stamped, but unmistakable. The footage from the courthouse screening room, the morning Kessler had detained her. Celeste stood frozen as the scene replayed in black and white. Her restrained in the chair, Kessler holding the clippers. The moment he shaved her hair, frame by frame, cold, silent, undeniable. Mariah's voice cracked. It's everywhere. CNN, MSNBC, even some conservative networks picked it up. Celeste didn't blink. They're calling it the shaving of justice. The nickname sliced through her like a razor. Have we confirmed who leaked it? Mariah hesitated. We think it was Officer Lewis. But he didn't do it to smear you. He says the world needed to see it. Celeste's gaze didn't move from the screen. She watched herself, the calm, the fury behind her eyes, the refusal to cry. It was all there, laid bare for the country to see. And strangely, she felt no shame, no rage, only clarity. She straightened, smoothed her skirt, and turned off the monitor. Schedule a press statement. Outside. 15 minutes. Mariah blinked. You're going to address the media? I'm not hiding, Celeste said. Not today, not ever again. When she stepped outside, the courthouse steps were already packed. Journalists, protesters, clergy, students holding signs that read, Protect Black Women and Accountability has a name, Bradford. Cameras swiveled, mics thrust forward. She didn't stand behind a podium. She didn't hold notes. She simply stood in the rain, hair uncovered, head bare, her voice calm but full of power. I was assaulted in the very courthouse I was appointed to uphold. I was humiliated not because of who I am beneath the robe, but because someone refused to believe I ever had the right to wear it. That moment, as painful and dehumanizing as it was, revealed something far greater than my own trauma. It exposed a system so invested in silence that it eats its own. A hush fell across the crowd. I am not ashamed of what happened, but those who enabled it, covered it up, or pretended not to see. They should be, and they will be. Flashes erupted like fireworks. And let me be clear, justice for me is not revenge. It's change. It's reform. It's names in files finally being read aloud. It's a system being forced to look itself in the mirror and not recognize the face staring back. With that, she stepped down. Inside, the air had shifted again. She walked into the courtroom like it was the first time. Only now, the benches didn't just hold attorneys and reporters. They held survivors, those who had been too afraid to speak, those who had been laughed at, silenced. They had returned. And when Celeste entered, every one of them rose, not for tradition, but for truth. She didn't look to the defense. She looked straight ahead. And then she said it. This court is ready to proceed with the reading of charges, not just against Deputy Kessler, but against those who made him possible. Gasps filled the room. The following names, she continued, lifting the file, have been turned over to the Department of Justice and the Office of Judicial Oversight for formal investigation. Judge Vernon Fields, Court Supervisor Alan Brecker, Deputy Chief Donna Lewis, and former District Attorney Spencer Walcott. The defense attorney's face turned white. Celeste's voice never trembled. Silence is no longer an option. Not here. Not anymore. The gavel struck once, and this time it sounded like thunder. And as the next witness rose to speak, the room knew. This wasn't the end. It was the reckoning. The courtroom was standing room only. Reporters lined the back. Community members filled every seat, some clutching court documents, others gripping hand-painted signs that read, We believe Celeste, and Shave injustice, not our dignity. The atmosphere was electric but hushed, as if everyone understood that something irreversible was about to unfold. Celeste Monroe stepped into the room, not with drama but with determination. She wore no wig, No scarf, just a fitted black suit, pearl studs, and the small glint of her judicial pin. Her scalp, still bare in parts, shone under the high fluorescent lights, and she wore it like a crown. She took the bench in silence. Even the defense attorneys, who had spent weeks trying to shake her authority, stood as she entered. The power dynamic had shifted entirely, not because the courtroom said so, but because the people had. As she adjusted the mic, she glanced toward the press gallery. There, just behind the last row of attorneys, sat Naomi Kessler, Deputy Thomas Kessler's wife. She held her young daughter in her lap, tears streaking silently down her cheek. That image, so human, so vulnerable, punched Celeste square in the chest, but it didn't sway her. "This court," she began, voice steady, "has spent the last several weeks hearing testimony not only about a single act of abuse, but about a pattern, a culture, of normalized degradation, sanctioned violence, and bureaucratic silence." She scanned the gallery. No one dared move. What happened in that screening room was not an accident. It was the product of a system that taught people like Deputy Kessler that power meant impunity, and that black bodies, especially black women's, could be handled without consequence. She paused to let the words breathe. But today, that changes. She turned toward the jury, a mix of ages, races, and professions. "You have reviewed the evidence. You have heard every word, seen every frame, and felt the weight of every silence. Now I will ask you to deliver your verdict." The foreperson, a retired postal worker named Calvin Murray, stood. His voice was hoarse. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Deputy Thomas Kessler, guilty on all counts: assault, abuse of authority, unlawful detainment, and violation of federal civil rights." Gasps echoed. Some people cried, others simply nodded. Celeste nodded once. "And this court," she said, her voice now sharper, "hereby sentences Deputy Thomas Kessler to 12 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." The room stilled. "But that is not all." She lifted a folder, the Monroe Mandate. "Effective immediately, this bench is enacting sweeping courthouse reform under federal guidelines. Every employee, officer, and judge will be subject to new oversight, anti-bias training, psychological evaluations, and an anonymous complaint system that bypasses local supervision. I am forwarding this mandate to the 11th Circuit Court and the Department of Justice." Murmurs broke through the tension. A reporter mouthed, "She's doing it." Celeste wasn't finished. For too long, justice in this building was conditional on skin color, conditional on quiet obedience, conditional on fitting a mold. She stood from her chair. "I'm done with that kind of justice, and you should be too." The courtroom burst, not into applause, but into something quieter and more powerful: resolve. The resolve of people who'd waited a long time to believe that justice could belong to them too. As the court recessed, people lingered. They didn't rush out. They whispered to one another. A mother pulled her son close and whispered, "That's what courage looks like." Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds had broken just enough to let the late afternoon sun spill down across the courthouse steps. Celeste emerged to a crowd that had doubled in size: students, elders, activists, legal interns. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just stood there, tall and rooted, like a monument not to herself, but to the truth. Naomi Kessler approached, daughter still in hand. Her eyes were red. "I didn't come to argue," she said softly. "I came to say thank you. You didn't just hold him accountable. You showed my daughter what it looks like to survive and still stand." Celeste looked down at the little girl, brown-eyed, pigtails, clutching a tiny backpack. "What's your name?" she asked. "Layla," the girl whispered. Celeste bent slightly. "Layla, Don't let anyone ever tell you that your voice doesn't matter, because it does. Loudly. The girl nodded, barely blinking. As they walked away, a cameraman caught the image, Celeste with her back to the courthouse, the young girl's hand still holding hers for just a second longer. That photo would land on the front page of major newspapers the next morning. But Celeste didn't care about press. Back in chambers, Mariah entered with a laptop. "Your email's exploding, but there's something you should see." She clicked on a video from a middle school in Atlanta. Dozens of black girls standing on a stage. All had short hair or shaved heads. They wore t-shirts that read, "I am enough," and spoke their truths one by one. Celeste leaned back, hands over her mouth, and for the first time in weeks she cried. But it wasn't from pain, it was from finally seeing the ripple. The voiceover of a student began playing. She stood in the fire and didn't flinch. So we know we can too. That night, Celeste posted her first personal message to the public. A simple video. No makeup, no robe, just her, in her kitchen. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that justice has a face like yours, share it. Tell someone. Stand up for someone. Don't let this be a moment. Let it be a movement.